And welcome to the Tearsheet podcast, where we explore financial services together with an eye on technology, innovation, emerging models, and changing expectations. I'm Tearsheet Editor-in-Chief, Zach Miller. And across Latin America, we're witnessing a very powerful shift as regions traditionally dominated by cash transactions begin embracing digital financial tools. And this transition represents more than just a technology adoption curve. It's creating new economic opportunities, enhancing financial inclusion, and building resilience against growing cybersecurity threats. And the numbers tell a compelling story, with nearly 12 million small retailers processing about $350 billion in B2C sales. 43% of those are still in cash. And 90% of B2B transactions between small retailers and suppliers handled through traditional methods. We're really looking at a financial transformation that's just in the early innings. And today I'm joined by someone at the forefront of this transition. Walter Pimenta serves as Executive Vice President of Commercial and New Payment Flows for Mastercard Latin America, where he's leading strategic initiatives to expand SME acceptance solutions, scale enablement through partnerships, and strengthen cross-border payments. And Walter's team is also tackling another critical trend, the growing cybersecurity challenges facing SMEs, with recent research showing 46% of small businesses having experienced cyber attacks. And this is very powerful, resulting in bankruptcy for nearly 1 in 5 affected companies. Walter, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Zach. Nice to meet you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, we're excited to talk. I got a whole bunch of questions for you because I'm excited to learn more about what's going on in LATAM. So obviously we're talking about enormous potential for digitizing payments in Latin America. From your perspective, particularly for a North American audience that Tearsheet has, what are some of the major differences between how SMBs operate financially in LATAM compared to the U.S. market? Are they different animals or are they similar challenges?
I think it's a little bit of both, Zach. They are different in the sense that I think that in many markets in LAC, the digital transformations is probably one step behind the US. We have other markets where PC penetration is as high as or higher than the US, Brazil, Chile, and so on. So it's a very diverse region, which is completely dominated by small businesses. And there are some data points that I frequently use that are I think important to qualify that statement. But just to give you a sense, in LAC, 99% of the businesses are small businesses. They account for 67% of the jobs in the region. They account for 60% of the GDP in the region. So they are indeed the backbone of the economy, right?
Yeah, this is a financial heartbeat, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's not different from other regions. Right. I think that in LAC, it's more of an exacerbated version of that. It's really a region that is mostly driven by the small businesses, and the way we refer to it is small businesses thrive, the markets and the countries strive. So it's the economic engine of the region.
And it's important to say, we had a guest on talking about LATAM this week actually, and he brought up the point that Latin America clearly we're talking about it in the aggregate, but it's each country is its own separate market, right?
Absolutely. And we have 44 markets where we operate in the region. And yes, to your point, they're very different from a number of different lenses. As I mentioned before, PC penetration is just one example, but the penetration of digital devices, which has been growing and transforming businesses and transforming commerce, are different in different markets of the region. We have extremes like Brazil, as I mentioned, very high PC penetration, cash being vastly eliminated from day-to-day transactions. And then you have markets that are as big as Brazil, such as Mexico, where the PC penetration is still very low compared to Brazil, and cash is still very prevalent. So it's a very diverse region, both from a cultural and from a financial point of view. It's a very interesting place to work on.
So given that diversity between countries, like everyone points to Nubank, in Brazil as the breakout, Latin American fintech star. Like, how do you and your team operate and organize around countries that are so vastly different from one another? How do you handle that in your work?
Look, every country is important. Every customer is important. That's the way we usually operate, right? Obviously, when you work with banks in Brazil or banks in Mexico, they tend to be, or acquirers or any of our partners, merchants, they tend to be larger, right? Which is a consequence of the size of the market. But fundamentally speaking, we are supporting all of those 44 markets where we operate in the region on equal terms. So my team is geographically spread in a way that we cover each one of our 3 divisions. So we have the Division North, the Central or South Division, which basically is everything south of Central America except for Brazil, which is its own division,
Separate
if you
market.
will,
Makes sense.
given the size and the representativeness of the market. But we operate across all the geographies in the region.
Awesome. I want to shift gears to the opportunity. So maybe zoom out a little bit. Your research identified, almost a $450 billion digital payment opportunity in the region. And I'm just curious, what forces are driving that potential, and where do you see the quickest adoption happening?
Yeah, look, that just to qualify that number a little bit as well, the $400 billion number refers to the opportunity across Americas, which includes the United States as well. LAC obviously has a vast opportunity on itself. From a trend point of view, Zach, I would say that the biggest trend that we're seeing is the digitization of the economy, right? And that is driven by internet penetration that is growing substantially in Latin America, by the access to smartphones and smart devices that is it's a given in most of our markets now. And that is really transforming businesses, right? And transforming commerce, if you will. For example, in small businesses, until 5-6 years ago, it was really seldom for small businesses to buy from supplier overseas. And what we're seeing now is this huge demand for payment capabilities so that those small businesses can shop for supplies overseas, simply because sometimes they're cheaper, sometimes they have better quality, and this is transformational. This was not the case pre-pandemic. It was certainly accelerated by the pandemic, but now it's the state of the region. It's a really digital savvy region, with our challenges, right? And financial inclusion being one of them, financial education being one of them. But fundamentally speaking, the number one trend is digitization, and with that comes a number of subsequent trends, such as the one that I mentioned, buying from suppliers overseas.
And so it sounds like it's an e-commerce or commercially led change as opposed to institutionally led. It's not that it's irrelated, or maybe somewhat related to the banking industry, the institutional side of things.
I think it's both, and maybe it would be good to explain a little bit the small business segment itself, because there's a lot of diversity on it as well.
Right.
So when we mention small businesses, most of the people tend to directly connect with the mom and pop stores, the corner stores that are selling goods for persons, which is absolutely for consumers, which is absolutely true. But that's part of that segment, right? The way we think about small businesses or reframe small businesses is among 4 categories, I would say. You have the individual entrepreneurs, again, the lawyers, the dentists, you name it, right? Those are, in essence, a small business. And then you have what we call the micro merchants. And the micro merchants are many of the mom and pop stores, many of the restaurants, you name it. Really, merchants that usually have less than 5 employees, and that operate in hundreds of thousands of locations, if not dozens of millions of locations in the region. Then you have what we call the more traditional small business, and from an employee number point of view, just to give you a sense, they range from 5 to 25. They have very different needs among them, right? But they operate on a slightly larger scale, and that's where you start to see more demand from the need that I mentioned before. For example, purchasing goods from overseas. But that's the third one, and then the fourth one is what we call the middle market. And the middle market is a company that is a larger small business, but it's not a large corporate, right? So it's up to from 25 to 250 employees. And the interesting thing about that is it's a very diverse group of companies, right? And with very diverse needs. So if you are a micro merchant, just to give you a few examples, you are probably in need for financial inclusion. That's where we see the highest penetration of cash in transactions, right? So there's a need for financial inclusion. There's a need for financial education. There's a need for digital literacy. That's where we see a lot of issues with cybersecurity, not exclusively there, but they're probably the most exposed ones, right? When you look at the small businesses, 5 to 25 employees, slightly different needs. There is still a need for financial inclusion depending on the market, depending on the segment, but they become a little bit more sophisticated, right? So how do I manage my cash flow? How do I manage accounts payables and accounts receivables? So how do I pay my employees? How do I maximize my earnings? So it's a little bit of a different need, if you will. And then when you go to middle market, it's a whole different thing. It's companies or small businesses that actually behave as larger companies, right? So they're usually operating behind an ERP platform, SAP, Oracle, you name it, right? So that supply management, chain management, inventory management, it's somehow taken care of, but they have different needs.
Sure.
They need new technology to pay suppliers. That's where virtual card numbers that are unique to a specific transaction comes to play. They have needs for, again, paying supplier overseas, which is not a given in this
Trade
region.
financing.
So it's a very diverse group of companies that account that those 99% of the businesses in the region.
That's wild. Another thing that came up, Walter, in your research was that the CPG, the consumer packaged good sector, seems to be a particular focus for Mastercard in the region.
Correct.
And I just would like to pull a little bit more on that and why you think the CPG sector is such a critical entry point for digital payments adoption.
Yeah, that's a great question. And look, we have been working with CPGs for quite some time now, globally, but primarily in Latin America. And there are many reasons for that. If you think about what I just said, right, the mom and pop stores or the micro merchants are the ones where are in the highest need for financial inclusion. They are the ones that concentrate the higher amount of cash from a transactional point of view. So think about what a CPG does, right? You name me, Pepsi, Natura, all the big ones that operate
brands in the world. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. They literally sell directly to those mom and pop stores, right? And the effect or collateral effect of that particular store not accepting digital payments is that whenever they pay those large CPGs, they also use cash. Right. And the cash is a huge pain point for the CPG industry. It creates inefficiencies across the board, from counting cash, handling cash, fraud, the security challenges that come along. And obviously that implies in operational costs because they have to have insurance for the cash and for the drivers and so on and so forth. So it's a big pain point for the industry as a whole. Now, it is a pain point for the business or the small business because we know they also suffer from all of those inefficiencies, even though, interestingly enough, the perception of the cost of cash and the inefficiency of cash for the small business is not as clear as the one for that the CPG has, right? But I think the great opportunity there is that intersection of needs on both sides of the equation, the small business and the CPG. The fact that the CPG has a direct relationship with all of those mom and pop stores, and through our partnership with those CPGs, we can provide technology so that they help us and the financial industry as a whole to bring those small businesses to the formal economy, I would say, right? Through accepting digital payments and enabling them ultimately to pay for those deliveries and those goods with a card or with a digital payment method rather than card. So yeah, we're very passionate about that.
I love that. As a small business owner myself, I can get passionate about this stuff as well. I want to talk a little bit about that cybersecurity research that you guys recently published, and that data point that nearly half of SMEs report experiencing cyber attacks, some with devastating consequences. So how are solutions that you guys are building or services that you're building helping to address that? So there's obviously, on one hand, you're trying to enhance digital payment adoption, and on the other hand, keep the bad guys out. So how do you manage both those things? I assume it's an art and a science.
Yeah, absolutely. But so let me give one step back, Zach, if you allow me. I think it's important to share a few thoughts on how we are addressing the needs of those four groups or three groups, if you will, of small businesses. And cybersecurity cuts across the three of them, right? But if you think about a micro merchant, right, and where the cost of the terminal to accept a digital transaction may be high, digital literacy is very, very limited in certain markets. we are tailoring solutions for that small business, that micro merchant, so that he can accept card payments and go digital, right? So that's what we do to make sure that those small or micro merchants are inserted into the formal economy. And yes, absolutely. By doing that, we are also making them digital to a certain extent, right? So we have to enable them digitally and then help them to become or to remain safe, if you will, in the digital ecosystem. And we have technologies that are amazing that we are deploying out there. So we have a solution called Tap on Phone, which you might have heard of. The cost of terminals have been a challenge to some merchants to embrace digital payments, and we have completely eliminated that by enabling software that can be downloaded in any NFC-enabled phone, so that now you can pay for that transaction leveraging the merchant phone and not necessarily a full-fledged terminal, if you will, with the same level of security. So it's digitization, but it comes with its own level of efficiency and security. And as I said, those merchants are going online. So when you go up in the pyramid, if you will, of SMEs, right, moving from micro merchants to small businesses and to middle market companies, then the digital channels, and by digital channels I mean e-commerce, they become much more prevalent, right? And you're absolutely right. They are to a certain extent exposed to bad actors, and I think we have a responsibility, as much as we do, to bring some of those to the financial ecosystem to protect them. So we have many solutions. I'll give you a few examples. So we have a solution called My Cyber Risk, which we are making enabled to all of the SMEs in this region that have access to a Mastercard business card. And what we do there is we help them to understand where are the deficiencies or potential gaps that they have in their digital stores, so that they can obviously protect themselves. We have many platforms that cater for education, digital literacy, financial education. So it all has to do with understanding how this digital world operates and helping them to have the right tools and the right assets to protect them as they go digital. So yeah, it's probably the most vulnerable chain, if you will, to cyber attacks, particularly the small merchants that have became digital over the past few years. But as I said, we have a responsibility and we have the technology to help them to overcome those challenges.
I want to shift our focus a little bit away from the challenges, which I think we've done a good job exploring, and love to hear about some of the success stories. I don't know if you have specifics, companies you can name, or more like generalized success stories, but I'd love examples of SMEs in Latin America that have successfully digitized their financial operations and seen measurable benefits from that.
Yeah, I'll share a few examples of maybe services and products that we have been delivering through our partners, issuers, acquirers, that really have been helping to address those needs and challenges that I mentioned to you. And maybe I can list a couple of examples that are
sure, that'd be great,
materializing those. But so I mentioned before, technologies such as Tap on Phone. LAC today, Latin America, is the largest region globally in number of Tap on Phone devices, which is very telling, right? It's a need. It's out there, and it's growing, it's scaling incredibly fast. I mentioned as well the need for those small businesses, the need and a demand to buy from suppliers overseas, right? And what we see a lot in this region is banks, they have services for consumers most of the time. It's a given, right? Many banks have services tailored for large corporates. So they have those large credit lines,
and these always fall between the cracks.
Exactly.
Right?
And the SME is like in between, right?
Yeah.
And just to give you a number that I find to be very telling, 18% of the debit card issuers in this region that issue for a consumer, only 18% issue a debit card for a business, which is a commercial debit card. In a region where 99% of the companies are small businesses. So what's happening out there is the small business do not have access to the right product, to the right set of services that addresses all of that I was telling you. So what we're doing is we're partnering with banks, with fintechs, with acquirers to bring this technology. As I mentioned, overseas transactions, international payments. We have a solution called Mastercard Move, and it's incredibly helpful for banks, for issuers, for fintechs, because what it does is through their own banking channels, they can now offer the ability for that small business to pay for that transaction overseas on a much faster way, on a much cheaper way, and a much more efficient way. And it is taking off pretty fast. So what we're doing is we're bringing products through our partners that really cater for the needs of the region. And I can share a few examples. We have recently announced a partnership with CBC, which is the largest bottling company for Pepsi globally, if I'm not mistaken. They operate in many markets in Latin America. We started working with them. They are CPG, by the way, that sell to all of those mom-and-pop stores, millions of mom-and-pop stores in this region that buy goods from the companies that they operate with. And we partnered with them in two fronts, right? We helped them to digitize their entire buying or selling process, if you will. Now, through a conversational chat platform, the merchant that was, handling all of those orders on a manual way, they can now order through WhatsApp electronically.
Nice.
They can control inventory on the palm of their hands, which is a huge advantage for them. They can accept digital payments because we now enable that same device that is used for ordering and for having that relationship with CBC. We enable that to receive NFC transactions through the solutions that I mentioned to you before, tap on phone and so on and so forth. And fundamentally, we issue through Migo, who is our fintech enabler in that particular use case, a prepaid card that they can use to then pay the CPG, right? Which in this case is CBC. So it's a very holistic way of thinking. It's digitizing the relationship of the CPG with the end customer, which happens to be a micro merchant, helping the merchant to get digital by having the right tools to become more fluent in this digital space, but also to receive digital payments. And once you receive digital payments and you know the benefits of using that digital transaction, they start to pay the CPG as well through a card. And that is fantastic because it really eliminates the cash from the equation. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, and we are very aware of that. But our ambition is to digitize over 11 million merchants by over the next couple of years. So it's a very, very, I would say it's a very strong project that incorporates a lot of what we have discussed here today. I'm very proud of it because I have been very involved with my team on this one, and we have launched it very soon. It's scaling, we're seeing traction, and it feels to me that this is kind of the benchmark for the way CPGs are going to operate moving forward, because the need for digitization is there. And as I said, there's demand in both sides. On the CPG side, that has to deal with all the inefficiencies of the cash payments, and for the small businesses that have the ability to digitize those transactions.
So it sounds like, Mastercard's model is to work through partners and to help to orchestrate all this
Absolutely.
stuff. And so where do you think, given where you sit, you mentioned that SMEs, they have needs and they're not getting the right products at the right time, right? So where are the opportunities still, I guess, for fintechs or for banks to step in and fill the needs that aren't getting met? Are there still a lot of opportunities? Yeah.
Oh yeah. The opportunity is huge. Look, I think the SME landscape, right, from a banking services point of view in the region is extremely concentrated, meaning that we have a few banks that have a very holistic value proposition, and those banks are the ones that drive what we call the principality in the relationship with the small business, right? So they bank with that bank, they have a card product from that bank, they get loans from that bank, they have the entire financial relationship with the banks. We have heard banks and fintechs, right? Just to be clear, we have heard again and again and again in research from small business that the entity that I trust the most to do business is my bank, right? And the problem is, again, it's very concentrated, which means that very few banks are really helping the SMEs to strive and obviously leveraging the business opportunity behind it. So what we have been doing is to connect with most of the banks in the region and to explain to them, first, look, you are issuing hundreds, millions of consumer cards. And I guarantee to you that if you do a data analysis, and we do a lot of that with our banks, right? And by looking at the spend behaviors, by looking at the ticket size, where they spend in their consumer cards, I can tell you those are small businesses, right? And you're losing an opportunity as a bank or as a fintech by not delivering the right product to this business, because we know that small businesses tend to concentrate their spend in the business card rather than segregating spend in 5 or 6 consumer cards. So there's a big opportunity for the banks in there, for the acquirers in there, when it comes to bringing those merchants with acceptance devices to the economy. So to the digital economy, there's a lot of opportunity, and we have been growing a lot. I think the most telling thing to me is the number of issuers that are now aware and eager to start investing more in this segment has more than doubled over the past year. It's a top priority in the region.
Wow.
And I'm very bullish in the sense that we have been in the forefront of bringing that awareness to the markets where we operate through our partners. So it's a very exciting moment for the industry.
Awesome, and props to you for all the work you've done there. I think I'd like to end our conversation on cross-border, because I know at least in the U.S. market, a lot of fintech, like the footholds were done through cross-border payments, because that's obviously still a problem in a lot of economies. I'm kind of curious how you see cross-border payment capabilities evolving to support some of the regional economic growth, and what role, financial institutions will play in that ecosystem.
Look, the more digital the world becomes, the more relevant cross-border becomes by nature, right? And it's interesting because, just to give you an example, if you are a small business in Brazil, and as I said, they buy supplies overseas, physical goods, right? But they also buy digital goods, right? So they're buying, you name it, cloud services, and they're buying software, and they're buying, you name it, lots of digital goods. And in many cases, the only way for you to pay for that is through a card, in many cases, right? So it's important to make sure that we really have the right product in the hands of small business so that they can tap on that opportunity. Now, when it comes to physical goods and the traditional cross-border payment model, right, through the intermediary banking network and all of that, look, it works, and I'm not debating that. It's not up for debate. But it also has its own challenges, right?
Sure.
The transactions are lengthy. They can be costly.
They're opaque also.
Can be a little bit, exactly. It lacks a little bit of transparency sometimes, right? And that long process, particularly for small businesses, it creates an issue when it comes to cash flow management. If a transaction is incorrect for whatever reason, right? You have the wrong character entered in the SWIFT system. It might take days for that transaction to be re-entered in the system, and that's literally impacting cash flow of those companies. So that's where, as I mentioned to you, Mastercard Move comes to play, which is this ability to enable banks to offer real-time transactions for cross-border payments to suppliers overseas, and in over 200 markets or countries globally. So it's a never
account to account, or does it push to a card? Move, right?
Both. I mean, we can deliver transactions reaching pretty much any endpoint, if you will, an account and a card globally. So it's a very comprehensive set of suite of services that accounts for most of the use cases that we have. But we have local rails, and we are also connected to local infrastructure in over 190 markets globally.
Walter, we covered a lot of ground. I feel like there's a lot more ground we could. Maybe we'll continue this conversation another time. It's been great having you on the Tearsheet podcast. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you, Zach. Thanks for having me.